Welcome back to the Tuesday night episode of Getting Defensive, brought to you by Gridiron Ratings. I'm your host, Kraig, and with me, as always, are our two co-hosts, James and Gary. James, how are you doing tonight, and how did week one treat you?
Both of those answers are the same. I'm doing great. Didn't lose any of my matchups week one, but I've also severely downsized the amount of leagues I'm playing in. I like to focus on that quality over quantity, which I think a lot of people eventually find themselves in. And I had a beautiful week one. Gary, how was yours?
Mine was pretty good. I think I won 6 of 8, something like that. And exactly where you're at with this quality over quantity. I used to be one of those, what I called roster chasers. You know, you'd have 30 or 40, rosters out there, and then Sunday you was watching the damn injury report because you have a habit of owning some of the same guys throughout the leagues. So then you spent that last hour before the game just trying to go and get the guy in, out, get substitutes. Oh, I hated that. It got so old after 10 years, 15 years of it. So, yeah, I've downsized a while back, man. How about you, Kraig?
Yeah, I'm probably still in too many leagues just for the sheer amount of time that I don't have on Sundays to try to check lineups. A number of them are free leagues, which I don't mind as much, if you lose in something like that. But yeah, it was a smattering across the board. I probably ended up 500 across all of them. So it is what it is. It's week one, and as we'll probably discuss tonight, week one often brings about a lot of overreactions that may not necessarily be warranted. So before we get into that, we do have a couple news items here, and I'm just going to say all three of these and see if any of them trip your guys' trigger for fantasy purposes. They're all injuries to people we've heard of, at least before. LaMarcus Joyner is out for the year, defensive back, sort of do-it-all guy for the Jets. He has torn triceps. Another defensive back, cornerback for the Lions, former first-round pick Jeff Okudah is out for the year with an Achilles tear. So a number of those that we've heard of this year already. And then Marcus Davenport, they thought it would be worse, but it doesn't sound that he tore anything. They think he's going to be out for a month-ish with a pec strain. James, I'll go to you. Do you think any of these are fantasy relevant, and were these guys that you were looking to roster to begin with?
I mean, all of them are fantasy relevant in the sense that they need to be on your radar, but the fact that they've all suffered massive injuries, they've gone from fantasy radar relevant to not relevant. These are deeper league names. Of course, if you've got them on your roster, you likely have them because there wasn't really any other options available, as opposed to you thinking, oh, I've got a DB1 or a DL1 here. You're kind of throwing straws, throwing spaghetti at the wall, straw into the haystack, whatever you want to say. And, okay, it didn't work out, go on to the next one. Obviously, we don't root for anyone to get injured. We want to have everyone play and be healthy. But, of course, every season, plenty of players get injured. These are 3 guys who did. And cut bait and move on. If you're in a dynasty league, you can hold on to some of them if you've got those injury spots, which you likely do. But in a redraft, it shouldn't be hurting you that bad. You shouldn't be in a situation where you lose a LaMarcus Joyner and you're not going to find a replacement. So they're names, but they're not that big of names.
Yeah,
Gary, any of those?
Only thing I would add is I'll probably be keeping my eye on personally for future when we get into the bye weeks to see who the 2 defensive backs, see who their replacements are, because especially like the cornerback, I'm sure he's not going to be a high quality type player. So unless they do something to trade and get somebody or something, it's probably going to be a productive by default position, maybe, that replaces the Jeff up in Detroit. As far as Marcus Davenport, the guys, I think we've talked about him either on this edition or Thursday's edition of Getting Defensive. He had to really show himself this year, and he's been hurt in the past with some ankle and foot injuries and all that, and this is just definitely not starting out the season very well. So if you reach for Davenport, you might as well reach somewhere else because you're probably on the same track as you were.
Yeah, he really hadn't shown a whole lot throughout his career, and it was kind of funny because I saw he had a really nice game for what we've come to expect for him, and then you go and look, and he got hurt, and I think it might be serious, and now he's out for a month. It's like, well, that tracks well with his career so far, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the guy that we'll have to watch is the one that came over from Kansas City. I'll hack up his last name. He actually came in and had a fairly decent game for them. Let me see here real quick, but he will probably be in line for more snaps if Davenport is out. Give me 2 seconds. I'm pulling it up here. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this. Tano Kopassinjon.
I know the guy you're talking about, and I've never been able to pronounce his name either.
Right.
I'm in the same boat as Kraig. I knew who you were saying, and I was not going to cut you off.
It's just go look, folks. The last name is spelled Kapassaggnon. And if you can pronounce it, please hit me up and let me know because I have no clue how to say that. But either way, he ended up with like 50% of the snaps. I thought that he had a couple of nice tackles, maybe even a sack, but I'm looking it up here to make sure. But
it says it's pronounced Passigno is the last name, so Tano Passigno.
He did all right. He had a sack and had 2 solos. I guess he padded his stats with the sack and a forced fumble, but still somebody and 2 QB hits. Of course, that's stacked kind of scoring in some format. But it still counts. Somebody just keep on the radar, folks.
All right. And I think we're just going to jump into, since it's sort of relevant to stuff that happened in the game this week. We had a question previously submitted regarding Joe Shobert and Devon Bush. And they wanted to know, what do we make of this situation? Is Shobert really no longer a linebacker? One, he played about 7 fewer snaps than Devon Bush did this week. He had about 4 fewer solo tackles. They both had the same number of assists. So there wasn't, a huge discrepancy one way or the other, but it felt like more of a split than maybe some people had anticipated to start off the year here. So, Gary, we'll start with you. Do you think either one of them is looking like they're going to be a linebacker one, or they're just kind of going to be eating into each other and splitting time?
I think Bush has the advantage in his position on the field from what I saw of the game, the way that Shobert was lining up. Bush never really left the center of the field, I guess you could say. They were using Shobert kind of like in an old Vince Williams role from what I saw. And we all know Vince Williams for years was never very he's never IDP dependent, really. I think he might have had like a stretch of games 2 years ago that people were trying to pick him up. But either way, I think Bush has the better position, and I think it's going to be a situation where if Bush stays healthy, Bush might have the edge on him. I hate to say that, but they look like they might have come up with a better plan for Bush and how they use them. So I guess, in my opinion, I'm going to start looking at both of them as upper LB2s.
James, any thoughts on either one of them? It's after one game, and like I said, we don't like to overreact on this show, but thoughts on it either way?
Yeah, after this one game, I agree it's not time to overreact, but also in the same light, I've had Devon Bush extremely high on my board for a very long time now. Even after his injury, he really didn't fall. I've been all about him, and this game just seems like exactly what I was expecting. I was expecting about a timeshare in terms of just overall snap percentages between the two, and I was expecting Bush to outproduce. And I'm going to continue to expect Bush to outproduce. And yeah, Shobert kind of isn't an LB1 anymore. He's going to fall into that Vince Williams role, as Gary said. And he's going to not be that fantasy relevant. And Bush is going to be the guy. Going forward, I'm expecting Bush's output to increase, not substantially, but to trend upward as opposed to maintaining or trending downward. And I would expect Shobert to go in the opposite direction. As the season goes on, I'm expecting Bush to just be the producer. So, yeah, I'm not really overreacting at this, but that's because I've already reacted enough 2 months ago on it. So I'm all about this. This is a check mark on my things I got right board, and I'm going to continue to sell that things are going to continue to be more right for Devon Bush moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely eggs in the face for me and a few other people that have been down on Bush anyways, and then turn around and Shobert got traded for, and then the next thing you coming out is the reports of, well, yeah, Shobert even said it himself, I'm going to be wearing the green dot. Yeah. I'm going to be in the middle of it. So again, it's one of those things where I guess whether they lied to Shobert lied to us or whatever, you can't always believe what you got coming out of camp during the off season. It's hard to argue. He's going to be creeping back up my rankings, my weekly rankings on Fantasy Pros this week because of what he did this past week. But man, consistency, show it to me. Make me a believer. Do it a few weeks in a row here. Don't get hurt, and I'll fall back in love with you, Bush.
Fair enough. So hopefully that answers your question. And like it says in the chat, if you guys have any sort of questions for us, please let us know as we're going through these topics. We love to answer your questions and help out however we can here. And with that said, we're going to move into James's topic of the night. We're going to be looking at waiver wire do's and don'ts, it looks like. So go ahead, James.
Yeah, I really want to hit the do's. It's not so much the don'ts, because the don'ts are, in my eyes, very easy to just avoid. You don't go and add the people I don't talk about, and you don't drop good players. It seems simple, but also I'd rather just focus on the guys you want to go attack, because after week 1, you're all over the place. And so, I'll lead off with those defensive linemen. I like Josh Sweat, another guy who I've been all about since last season. He's the younger brother in many people's eyes to Montez Sweet, but he's my guy in Philly. He's the guy who's going to do something there because someone's got to do something there. And, Sweet is that guy. He's going to get some sacks. And when you look at him on a week-to-week progression, take a look at what San Francisco did last week. He's a very, very nice add to add and have 2 great weeks to start, and then maybe you flip him because he's not elite. But if you're looking for a guy to produce this week and not, long-term necessarily, I want to attack him, as well as anyone who's playing against Tennessee, because we saw what Chandler Jones did, and I want to go attack everyone there. So give me Carlos Dunlap, give me Rasheem Green. Those are 2 other defensive lineman eligible players, especially Green, who in sleeper is D-line and linebacker eligible, that I just want to go and grab. And sure, maybe they whiff this week against Tennessee, but maybe they don't, and maybe I can flip them for a very beautiful profit. So defensive linemen, those are my 3 big ones. You go over to linebacker, and I'm going to stick with attacking the Tennessee Titans. Give me Jordan Brooks. He looked very good in week 1, had lots of great production, and I'm going to, again, ride that train. If anything, Tennessee's going to want to run the ball more and stuff it up the hole with Derrick Henry, who performed horribly this past week. So Jordan Brooks should see that production coming in many different directions, so I like him. Also love Shaq Thompson. He had an elite week this past week, and going in against the Raiders, I don't expect him to underperform. And, he's the kind of player who's kind of hurt a lot of people in the past and is kind of maybe a Joe Mixon on defense, where it's fool me once, fool me twice. I don't want you the third time, and the third time might actually be the time. So I'm very interested in him. And then I'll also give love to Eric Wilson, another one of my favorite linebackers, as a guy who's not that elite of an actual player, but he seems to be getting the production in Philly after 1 week, and I'm going to bet on him again going in against San Francisco, and that's what I like there. And then to round it out, let's go over to those defensive backs. Give me Eric Rowe. We might actually finally have the guy in Miami. I know it's 1 week, so obviously it's just 1 week, but give me Eric Rowe. I'll see what happens. I'll make that ad. I'll stick him on my bench, see if he hits. I'll start him. I don't really care. I know he's going up against not that good of a game in Buffalo, but let's see what happens there. And if you're looking for a week-to-week start, if you lost somebody, if you had maybe Darnell Savage or something like that, give me Rashawn Jenkins against Denver. I know Jacksonville is not very good. I know Rashawn Jenkins isn't all that good, but that combination, I'll like to hit it and just see what happens for this coming week. And then last but not least, I'll talk about Jalen Ramsey, a very surprising name that people don't really want to think about as being a good IDP player, but his usage for the Rams was very interesting. He was not just playing cover corner and shutting everything down. They had him line up all over the field. He was rushing. He was highly involved in the game, which is something we really haven't seen from him in the past. Normally he just disappears and shuts someone down. And going up against the Colts, a team that I will probably forever say is not good and is going to give you lots of nice production from an IDP side, I'd like to see what Jalen does. So he's another one who I like kind of long-term and short-term. And those are my big 9, my quick hitters of guys to think about who are likely available on your waiver wire. And maybe you should go add them if you need them.
Sounds good. And Gary, I know you give some just sort of thoughts on, waiver wires and the kind of things you look for and do on them too.
Yep. I just want to I have to ask James. I love the Josh Sweet, man. I can't believe he didn't have more opportunity last year because he outplayed Barnett on that side in rotation with him last year. So a great call there. But I just want to make sure. Did you say Carlos Dunlap?
I did.
Wow.
He's still on the. Yeah, I know.
Down.
He's still on the field. He's still happening.
Write that down. All right.
Again,
yeah.
I'm
I
thrilled.
think Gary wants to get defensive with you, is what.
Yeah. 50% of the snaps. 50% of. I guess but he is a veteran. He probably didn't play any preseason, which we're going to hit on that. So just to roll right into. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, to be entirely clear, I'm not endorsing Carlos Dunlap as a season-long ad. I'm endorsing Carlos Dunlap against Tennessee and hitting on his 1 or 2 sacks and getting that big play production in a league where you can get some big play production and have a nice solid floor for tackles relative to what Carlos Dunlap typically does, which is be a rotational defensive line. I really like him for this week and not for the full season.
I do not endorse James and Carlos Dunlap, but I am going to talk about some waiver wire do's and don'ts. We're always having fun here, folks. We're getting defensive. It's what it's all about. So other than the fact that we've mentioned a few times, don't freak out. It's week 1, folks. We're going to talk about another reason about why we had so many other players shine other than the studs. But my best advice to anybody, if you make a move, no matter if it's a standard size league or a deep league, you're probably better off if you're in a deep league, if you're going to start reaching and changing a little into the bench type guys around to see what you could hit. But you can make or break, and I see it all the time. People make and break their IDP lineups with the first few weeks of the season. They'll go and they'll drop somebody because they haven't produced yet, or they're not being consistent, or some other overachiever, some kind of unknown guy, for whatever reason, has been able to pull off a couple of weeks of really good production. So then they jump at them and they drop somebody. Don't do that. Don't do that. I've got a waiver wire. It was supposed to come out today. I had a waiver wire article set up, but had a little bit of technical difficulty, so it's probably not coming out until sometime tomorrow. But I put that across. Stay vanilla. Stay vanilla. Don't go crazy. I put a few options there to watch, maybe some deeper formats for somebody to go and do something with. But don't make that mistake. If you want to do anything in this first, maybe second week, and you want to improve some position on your team, watch what the other people in your league are doing. You'll be surprised on who they'll drop to go reaching for something else that's really shiny. And when it comes to consistency, folks, we've got a 17-week season now. they're going to have guys resting. They're going to start cutting some snap counts. They're going to start doing everything they can with the shortened preseason and the longer season to get as much out of these guys all the way through. We're looking at a different beast here, folks. It's not going to be the same season, even if it, COVID season last year was really weird. But if we look prior to the COVID season, we're going to see, I think, in the long run, around week 12, we're going to see by then that they're using their players a little bit differently, giving them a little bit more time off. If they've got to leave, they might take their studs out. They don't want to take a chance, wearing them out. I really think that the best do that I could tell anybody would be watch that waiver wire after they run and see who's sitting there to be plucked up. And throw on, you could get rid of something on the end of your bench or get rid of your linebacker 3 or whatever he is and pick up a real quality person. It's not going to happen in every league, but it will happen.
Yeah, and I'd like to just piggyback off of Gary there because that is the perfect PSA for our listeners. I just named 9 guys. Some guys I'm pretty high on. Some guys Gary's not high on. But all 9 of those guys are people who I'm looking at as short-term profit players, guys who can come in, continue to produce at what they did at week 1, and then you can flip them because in all likelihood, they're not going to be 17-week guys. If they're going to be 17-week guys, they're already on your roster or on your teammates' roster. So, the best guys to really go at are those guys who get cut for the hot guys. And so exactly what Gary said. Someone's going to get cut in your league who someone else is going to go add, and everyone's going to go, what? Why did that person get cut? Because that person overreacted. And it's always good to be the person with that high waiver claim or that high FA budget ready to go add the guy who should have never been cut in the first place, let alone the guy who is a free agent because he wasn't expected to do well. Yeah. So I named 9 guys. I think some of them are going to hit long-term, but they all won't, and it's not to be expected. And the best bet is to just draft well, and that's what we've been preaching for forever. And in all likelihood, you probably did, and you don't need to overreact. Listen to Gary. Patience.
Well, I think that is a sort of great segue into what we had wanted to talk about tonight here. We were talking about sort of the waiver wire choices, and we're going to be going over a number of names that, unless you're in deeper leagues or you pay a lot of attention to the draft each year, you probably haven't heard of these guys much lately at all. But to this point, you're going to be seeing some of these guys pop in week 1, certainly, and weeks throughout the year where they're not going to have that weekly value the next week or in 3 weeks because of the way that Gary talked about them using veterans as far as more time off. They're going to split reps more. And that's a lot of what you're running into already. So I can only imagine, week 15, 16, or even before that, some of these teams are resting if it's not a situation where they're really going to be fighting for that division title those last few weeks, but they've generally kept the schedule that way. Or if they've just given up, some of these veterans are going to be on that IR list all of a sudden for 3 weeks. And that's just something we're going to have to be able to adapt to. So to James's point, I think a little bit, if you can profit in some way where someone has a hot couple weeks that you picked up and you can flip them because you don't believe in them, that could be the best way to use the waiver wire in a weird year like this. So, all right, the first name we're going to go with here. And
hey, can I add one more thing here, folks?
Certainly.
Sorry, Kraig. The one thing that I wanted to kind of circle back around to after we got done going there, folks, your guys like Darius Leonard, Devin White, a few of them, they didn't actually tip the scale like the studs they are, how they usually would get, 10, 11, 12 sacks, interceptions, whatever you were expecting out of these studs. There is a major reason for that. There's a major reason for you not to freak out. Don't accept any stupid trade offers or do anything crazy on the waiver wire or whatever. Those guys barely, if at all, seen any snaps in the preseason. They 3-week preseason, most of them, there were still guys that, like some of these studs that did not play or play much, even in that third game. It's not been the same cycle for them in camp this year. And them knowing that they're going to be playing 17 18 weeks, I guess, actually, with the bye weeks, when they've got that long of a season, why should they? They know what they have in Darius Leonard. They know what they have in Devin White. They know what they have in all their studs, those guys that you've seen ranked up and high on all these different websites and, is going first, second, third, fourth IDP off the board in your drafts. Those guys are still the same guys. It's just going to take them a few weeks here to get the rust knocked off and get into gameplay and get into game action. And it's like some of these players that we're getting ready to talk about, I think it's just the opposite about them. They got to play in the preseason. They were a little bit more primed. They were uncertain players that they wanted to see play, that needed the time on the field. So with that being said, Kraig, please go right ahead.
Well, yeah, to your point, go ahead, James.
I just want to add one more thing on top of Gary, which is, yes, all the Devin Whites and all the Darius Leonards who didn't perform excellent are likely to come back. But even in a world where they somehow don't, the risk of trading them at a low point before seeing what happens is not worth whatever that reward is. Mm-hmm. So even if you say, I'm going to hold on to these guys and, Darius Leonard somehow is junk and we all just missed it, you made the correct decision at not trading him now because that's a very unlikely outcome. Yep. So always remember that. You're playing this game based on strategy, and you're basing it off of what you think is going to happen and not actually what the results are. Because if you just go by results, you're guessing. You need to have a consistent base, and that base is don't trade studs after 1 week.
Yeah. And you saw a lot of what Gary's talking about, as well as James, in all of these games. If you want to go at the macro level, you'll see some of these teams just fell flat on their face to start the game, and then they picked up, or they just, like the Packers, just were flat the entire game and didn't do anything. Some of the players, if you want to look at last night, with the Raiders game against the Ravens, Patrick Queen had like 1 or 2 tackles at halftime, and he ended up with 9 total, sack, a tackle for a loss. He just had a great second half where literally, if you watched him, it had that feeling of he didn't have his legs under him for that first half, and he had to get reused to game speed. So make sure you're paying attention to these things, and if you're seeing a huge real issue, look for that the next week to see if anything's been fixed. Don't overreact. That's, I guess, the theme for tonight with these players.
Hey, folks, if I don't overreact about Alex Anzalone only getting 3 freaking tackles with 100% of the snaps for Detroit, if I'm not freaking out and telling you guys I was completely wrong, don't freak out yet. Don't just he's still wearing the green dot. As they're not bringing up the rookie yet. Just be patient, folks. And I got to add one more thing, Kraig. I apologize, but
no
guys,
problem.
If you go on that waiver wire, if you are going to make a move at any point in time for somebody that you're not 100% like know the name, look at the stats. Look at the stats, because if you turn around and look at some of these stats of these guys right now, like we're going to be talking about some, you can go, they'll have 1 tackle, but they had a sack, and then they got a QB hit and a tackle loss, all for that, and they like tripled the amount of points that they would have originally got. And this is a player that may never even get to see any more than 20 or 30% of the snaps as a rotational player. Make sure that you look at those snaps. If you're not a snap count kind of person, or if you're just trying IDP for the first time, you want to look for those base tackle type solo combined tackles. That's a good sign if you've got a decent number of those. But if you start seeing just, an interception, fumble recovery, and a forced fumble, that could have been one single play that guy got lucky. And you're just reaching. You're just reaching for something that's probably never going to happen. You have to make sure that the stats kind of weigh a little heavier on the base tackles. That's a good indication if you're not a snap count person.
All right. No problem. It's great info, and that's what the people are coming here looking for. So we're going to start with the Rams, who I know Gary's had a vested interest in, but we're not going to be talking about Ernest Jones here very much tonight. We're going to be going with Justin Hollins. He had 6 solos, 2 assists, 2 sacks, and a tackle for a loss on 74% snap count for the Rams, basically playing opposite of Leonard Floyd. Jones was a 2019 fifth rounder they had gotten off of waivers from the Broncos and got his first real large amount of playing time and showed well. James, I'm going to go to you, but I want to know, is this someone that you have any interest in sort of in, a deeper league if you need to pick someone up, or do you feel it was largely based on that just pitiful Bears offensive line?
I mean, as far as week 1 reactions go, yeah, I'm really interested. I, like Gary, was very interested in Ernest Jones, and Ernest Jones wasn't on the field. He didn't really get any defensive snaps whatsoever, and Justin Hollins did. Do I even know who Justin Hollins is? Not really. I don't. But what I do know is the Rams created a guy out of Corey Littleton from nothing. They made Alec Ogletree be something. They tried to make Micah Kaiser something.
I'm going to get defensive on you early, man.
Well,
Justin Hollins is an outside linebacker. He played across from Darius Leonard. He's 6'4". I've been telling people this all year. I knew who Justin Hollins was because of other people asking questions about him. He's actually an outside linebacker edge rusher. He is not an inside linebacker. He does not play inside with Kenny Young or where Ernest Jones will eventually be playing. He's not that inside guy. He is an outside edge rusher. He did exceptionally well in this situation. I'm sorry to cut you off on that, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand that's 2 different positions. They have nothing to do with that inside linebacker. Now, this edge rusher that he is, I actually, we're talking about him for a reason. We want to see what he's going to do. As an edge rusher, he could be a good guy to keep an eye on, maybe pick up, stash, yeah, sure, whatever. Just don't go crazy about it. But at the same time, most edge rushers in normal, standard, balanced leagues, if you got them as an LB play, they're nothing more than an LB2, at best, and most of the times. They have to really explode and get those sacks and such. I didn't mean to cut you off, James, but maybe I did. I have no idea. We also have a question there for you, James. We can cut in real quick on that since I did that because I'm not touching this dirty O.
Well, I'll just finish my Justin Hollins diatribe before I dive into Robbie Anderson versus Melvin Gordon. I like Justin Hollins, and I was going and mentioning all these inside guys who he is not, because exactly what you said, he plays on the outside, and his production came off of 2 sacks. But that defense is going to always have people who can edge rush and pass rush when Aaron Donald's in the middle, because Aaron Donald is seeing tons of volume. So in leagues where you do get high percentage points for sacks, where those are a viable strategy versus just trying to rack up those inside guys who rack up tackles, Justin Hollins is a guy who I like long term. I think that whoever is there is going to produce. Yeah, Leonard Floyd's also back there, I believe, so he's doing something. But Justin Hollins, when he's on the field, he appears to produce because whoever's on the field opposite of Aaron Donald is going to produce. So I like him going forward. Again, like Gary said, he's not going to be a tackle volume machine, but he saw, 74% of the snaps?
Yep.
That's enough for me to roll with him until he stops seeing that kind of volume, because on that defense, he should be producing more often than not.
Here's a little tidbit for you about him, too. Okay, so what does him and Shaq Barrett both have in common?
They're huge units.
They came from the Broncos?
They came from the Broncos. Both of them. Within the last, 5 years or so, they were both, I believe, drafted or whatever by Denver, but yet let them go. We see how Shaq Barrett did in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Do we have another one of those up there with the Rams? That would be interesting. I like Malik Reed that they have in their third edge rusher right now down in Denver. I would think eventually Von Miller is going to leave, but after the game that he just had, who knows? So So Malik Reed might be somebody to watch somebody else pick up next year. And that's it. I'm done.
No problem. We'll get to the question here, and James, will go to you since Gary doesn't want to deal with it. Would you trade Robbie Anderson without any other context for Melvin Gordon?
Without any other context, simple answer, yes. Melvin Gordon should be producing up front, and then he should not be producing later in this year when Javonte Williams, in theory, comes in and starts to know the playbook and all of the typical things we see with rookies. Robbie Anderson, I still think is going to just be a week-to-week player where sometimes he goes up, sometimes he doesn't. So give me Melvin Gordon. Give me the short-term production and the knowledge that he's probably not going to be elite in the postseason when I don't want to start Robbie Anderson in the postseason either. So, and when I say postseason, I mean my fantasy postseason. So just give me Melvin Gordon. I think you do pull that trigger without any other context of PPR or what your running backs look like or anything like that. All else neutral, I'll take Gordon.
Gary, you seem to be in agreement. I know you don't want to.
I'm just glad it's over. I'm just glad it's over. Folks, I don't mind you asking. I'm just not, yeah.
For what it's worth, in a redraft league, I would take Melvin Gordon as well. Dynasty, more specifics, it might be different. But
thanks,
all right.
Boss Man Fat. You made my night. Dirty-o.
And I'm going to jump down quick to stick with the Rams because we have another Ram on our list here tonight. Kenny Young, who was in the middle and did play 100% of the snaps for the Ravens. He had 5 solos, 5 assists, and a pass deflection. He, of course, came over in that infamous Marcus Peters trade that they had made that just made little sense at that time. But, Gary, we'll go to you. Kenny Young, do you think that he's going to be the guy for a few weeks here or the season long?
I don't know what it is about me and having 1 year late bloomers or whatever it is, because I wrote this article last year about how Kenny Young made so much sense in the middle of that defense over Kaiser or Reeder. But at that time, Ernest Jones hadn't been drafted either. So if I'm doing anything with Kenny Young, I think that I would not plan on him being there solidly or consistently for the year. I still believe that at some point something's going to break at that inside linebacker position and we're going to see Jones on the field. But, I've really stuck my pole in the rear end of Johnson and Jones and trying to keep him in the highlight. As far as I can tell, if you own Kenny Young, I would look at it as this year you've got a good play until it ends. I mean, it's not somebody that I'm going to put a lot of stock into. It's kind of like the Alex Anzalone of Detroit.
Well, James, I want to ask you, do you think that Gary's just going to be a year late on Ernest Jones, too, with Kenny Young being a free agent after this year? Is he just looking into the future every year too far?
I'm going to give Gary a little bit more credit. I think Ernest Jones is more imminent than 1 year away. We like to get defensive here, but no one got defensive over Ernest Jones because we both like him, and I both like him going forward. Kenny Young probably is the guy for week 2 and week 3 and maybe week 4, maybe week 5. Maybe week 6. But I've got Ernest Jones on my bench as my number 1 rookie who's not doing squat, waiting to show up. He's number 1 out of all IDPs in that category for me. And, do I think Kenny Young is a very nice short-term ad who can go and become a very nice guy to flip like all the guys I kind of mentioned in my waiver wire analysis? Yeah, I think he could be. Or I think he could also fall flat on his face, a la Micah Kaiser. I'm not as big on Kenny Young this year or last year as I am on Ernest Jones. So it's kind of in the middle. You look at a guy and you say, well, he's got the playing time. He's likely to not just be awful. So can I ride with him? Yes. But for the teams I like to build them on guys that I think I could ride with for the whole season or who I think I can immediately flip. And I don't know if Young necessarily is at the top of that list, but he's definitely on.
I can tell you one thing about Young. So the one thing that I kept saying about him and why Ernest Jones, and I think we talked about it, James, is he ended last year with a PFF grade of like 40.2, something like that. I just looked, and they've gave him an 81, which is way above average, 81.4 for this past game. Folks, we're not fortune tellers. Maybe Kenny Young getting his chance makes a big turnaround. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't sell the house and bet on it. It's a tough thing. We need to see a few more weeks of it. That was 1 week.
All right, moving on. We have another linebacker, Nick Vigil for the Vikings. He and Eric Kendricks both played 100% of the snaps this past week. Nick had 8 solos, 2 assists, a sack, 2 tackles for a loss. This is his first year with the Vikings. And, Anthony Barr was out, which I think may skew this a little bit. But, James, we'll go to you first. Nick Vigil, do you see him having utility just while Barr is out, or is he looking like he's going to be sticking on the field even when he comes back?
I think utility is a very nice word there because I think he's going to have utility while Barr is out, and I think he's kind of a utility player when Barr is back. He's someone who probably won't screw you, but probably isn't going to do much beyond what you're expecting out of him. So if you're looking for that high floor, low ceiling type of quick ad, yes. But in general, when it's going into week 2, Nick Vigil is not the kind of player I'm looking to add. I'm looking for someone with more ceiling. And yeah, that floor is nice, but in theory, whoever I have on my bench right now, I already think their floor is fine. I don't think it's awful. So he's kind of the guy that you add just to make a move, the kind of guy you add when you're like, I need to have my LB2 not stink up the joint this week. I need to get some kind of consistency. But sitting on him for a full season in your standard size league, it feels just not like what you want to do.
Gary?
All right. So Nick Vigil was pretty productive in Cincinnati for a long time, just based off production by default. And then when his contract was up, they didn't have any trouble letting him walk away. He went to the Chargers. I think he had a couple of games he started last year. I can't remember anything standing out. He's basically Barr's replacement for right now, just like James said. Barr's dealing with a knee injury. And until I hear Barr is out for the season, I'm not really getting real interested in Nick Vigil at all. Kind of keeping an eye on him in the situation. He did have 8 solo, 2 assists. Let's see what else he have. 1 sack. Technically he's actually – in one game, he outproduced Barr's best season, but Barr is a totally different beast when he in real life NFL, and he means so much more for the Minnesota Vikings defense than ever producing like that. They have roles. So Nick Vigil having a good game for his first chance to replace Barr, I'm not so sure that it's going to stick. Even if, say, Barr misses a couple more weeks. Talk to us in 3 weeks and we'll see what happens.
All righty. Last linebacker we have to discuss here, and I think we'll probably call it after that unless either one of these other guys really trips your trigger. Jermaine Pratt had a really nice game. He had 6 solos, 2 assists, tackle for a loss, and then another QB hit. He's a 2019 pick by the Bengals, but his snap count was about half of that of what Logan Wilson was, who led them to being the Bengals in snaps. So, Gary, Jermaine Pratt excite you at all with that stat line, or are you just thinking it's sort of how that game played out?
I am actually going to defer this to James for a certain particular reason. He had a take on Pratt earlier on, and I'm going to let him roll with this.
Yeah, I had a take on Jermaine Pratt because I've always said that he's just going to be the guy who's there. And honestly, I don't like this game because I don't like where his snap count was. He wasn't really there that often. I thought he was going to be a guy who floated around a huge 80% plus snap count and just racked up volume by, production by default, Gary's favorite term because it's an excellent term. And that snap count scares the heck out of me. It's very odd to see someone who produced as well as Pratt did, but then also not get the snap count you want to see. And I don't believe in Jermaine Pratt as just an intrinsic elite talent who just needs to be on the field because he's got great draft capital and great skill. So when I see the Bengals are going, you're going to get about half the snaps, I don't think this game is going to change their mind. So I'm a little wary. It's kind of the opposite of what my take was on him heading into the season. I thought he was going to get more volume. So if that switches up, great. But I'm buying what the Bengals are telling me, which is half a game snap count, and I don't want to buy that.
My counter to that is I agree with him 100%, but I guess not my counterpoint. I'm sitting here looking at Logan Wilson, which is, the guy wearing the green dot. He's been announced, and he ended up with like 86. Well, he had 7 combined tackles. He had 4 solos and 3 assists. Now, that is not elite top-end stuff here, for a guy that was on there supposed to be calling the plays, middle linebacker. I have not gotten to review the tape, but what I'm going to look at here real quick is I'm wondering what he did during the preseason, Logan Wilson. And that's going to counterpoint my Pratt. Because if they held Logan Wilson out, but Pratt has played a lot in the preseason, it could be Logan Wilson just warming up and Pratt taking advantage of his situation at the time. I can't read this on here. It's like this, I can't tell you what it is. So anyways, right now I'm seeing triple. I'm ready to go to bed. I'm old. But I'm with James when it comes down to it. I mean, it's another one of those things. His snap count's a very big concern. That's a lot of points there in a short period of time when he's not supposed to be the main guy. So, let's see what happens. We got to see what happens. I don't think that there's anybody that we've talked about that I would go, even if the matchup was right this early in the season, that I'm going to get into my lineup next week. Is there anybody that we've talked about that you guys are going to get into your lineups?
In the deepest, like the 20-team leagues that, degenerates get into or something for fun, pick someone up and see. But in any sort of standard size league, 12 teams where you're starting 6 to 8 guys, maybe 3 linebackers, maybe if you just ignored your defense and you need to mix it up or something, but for the most part, no.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of a shout out to myself, which is maybe not the right move at all. But if Shaq Thompson is available in your league and you can go grab him, I don't have an issue with him getting your LB2 spot or utility spot or flex or whatever it may be. I think he's good. But yeah, everyone else we mentioned is a dart throw. So yeah, the guys in Tennessee who I'm saying, well, Tennessee was really bad week 1. Do I think they're really that bad? No, but I could be wrong. So that's a dart throw. But the key word is dart throw. None of these people we're talking about should be add and start unless you're facing mass injuries or, like Kraig said, you just ignore defense. And if you just ignore defense and you just found this podcast, shame on you.
Go back and watch all the old episodes and catch up before Thursday, because we'll be back on Thursday at 9 Eastern to get you ready for the week ahead. JJ Wenner, Tripp, and Gary will be on giving you more advice that you can use to win your leagues and fix your defense if needed. But that's going to do it for the Tuesday night show. You can find all of us on Twitter. You can find our Twitter handles down below ourselves. James, any parting thoughts for tonight?
I'm just glad football's back. Even though my Browns still have 1 win on opening week that I can remember as a human, I'm still happy. I don't care. I'm happy.
Gary, any final thoughts?
Yes, please subscribe, guys, so you can get a chance to win one of those Gridiron Ratings Playbooks. And remember this conversation in 4 weeks, because it's going to be totally different. Because there's going to be so much change every week for the next 3 to 4 weeks. We're going to be like, oh my gosh, did you see that? What about this? Folks, it'll level out. It'll take it a little bit of time. your IDPs that you paid good money for in draft stock, waiver wire, whatever it was, they're going to pan out. You just got to be patient.
And to Gary's point, that's on YouTube, which you're watching us on tonight here. Click the subscribe button. Every 25 that they will be drawing a new winner to receive a free $40 value, although it's probably really much more value than that. Gridiron Ratings Playbook that'll be updated yearly on their views on people. And final question here that we got in just at the end, Eli Mitchell worth a pickup? Yeah, I mean, he should be owned in probably every league for offense. Depends on who you have to drop. You know, if you're completely stacked at running back, maybe not, but someone will be picking him up and he'll be worth being owned.
So boy, they're just lowering us down with offensive questions. See, this is what happens. This is what happens. I say dirty O. I don't. Yeah, here it is. Go ahead, James. If you want to finish this up, you two go ahead. Wrap it up.
You know, I'll say this. Do I think Eli Mitchell is worth your number one waiver claim? In certain contexts, yes. So Blue Crew here has Saquon, who did not perform very well, Swift, who looked great, Chase Edmonds, who played like Chase Edmonds, and Latavius Murray, who might not be at full strength. Yeah, it's a 10 team. You got a half PPR. I don't really love those running backs, but also if you're starting two, you're not going to be benching Barkley anytime soon. You're not benching Swift. So do you want to use your number one waiver claim on it? I don't know. Maybe in that context, maybe not. That's kind of right down the line. And I think no. You know, we know how Shanahan operates those running backs, which is whoever's hot, he goes with. And, you know, if Eli Mitchell was a DNP CD this week, would anyone go, wow, I'm surprised? No. So add him, obviously, put him on your bench, you know, cut whoever's the least valuable. But you're playing with running backs here and you're playing with Shanahan running backs. You can't ever bet on them for more than a week.
I got to admit. Go ahead.
No, Gary. Go ahead, Gary.
I got to admit, I actually just put my bid in on him in the Scott Fish Bowl League, but I needed running back severely bad, so I put half my bidding money on it. You just to get it over with. But I want to give a shout out to Stephen Bailey, which is a Gridiron Ratings member, friend of mine off of Twitter. We're always talking IDP because I remember him saying early last spring after the draft in a big MFL draft that he said that he was fine as long as he got Eli Mitchell. That is the San Francisco running back rookie, right?
One of them, yeah. The one that played this week anyway.
All right, okay. All right. Just making sure that dirty O, you know.
Ooh, I like this question because this is your classic.
Gary's just going to throw up over here or something on an IDP show.
I hijacked the show with Dirty O here at the end.
You guys just turn off the lights when you're done.
I'll say this. James. Don't trade Justin Jefferson and Deontay Johnson for Tyreek Hill. Don't do it. I know Tyreek Hill looked amazing. I know the Browns have a great defense. I know all those things are, well, Tyreek Hill, the sky's the limit. You know, the sky's also the limit for Justin Jefferson. Don't give away Deontay Johnson just to, like, laterally move to Hill. I guess maybe a mild upgrade. I don't even know if this is Dynasty, but even in a redraft, I'm not touching this deal. I'd counter back with Jefferson and Deontay for Hill and another strong asset. And that's my take.
End it. Hurry up.
That's it for the night. Thank you, everyone, for seeing our show tonight here on Getting Defensive, brought to you by Gridiron Ratings. We'll be back next week at, what time is it? 10 p.m. Eastern? I think it's 10 p.m. And then Thursday, 9 p.m.
Yep.
10 p.m. Eastern Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. Have a good night, everyone.